My devoted husband passed away in a tragic accident. While clearing out his belongings, I discovered his secret diary. It was filled with words of profound love, written for another woman. I used to think our marriage was wonderful, until I read about her. Just thinking about her makes my entire day bright. So this is what it truly feels like to love someone deeply. I held the umbrella for her in the rain today. It was the closest I've ever been to true happiness. My greatest regret in this life is not being able to be with her. I wiped away my tears and threw the diary into the fire. If there is an afterlife, I will step aside and let him fulfill those lingering obsessions. Suddenly, my mother's gentle, cheerful voice echoed in my ears. I stood there in a daze for a long moment before finally coming to my senses. I had actually been reborn, returning to the exact day of my father's birthday party. "What's wrong? I heard Ethan had some business and couldn't make it today. Are you upset?" My mother whispered to me. That's right. At this point in time, under our parents' arrangements, Ethan Jiang and I had met several times. Our relationship was in that ambiguous stage, an unspoken understanding within our social circle. Everyone assumed we were a couple. All that was missing was a formal announcement. "No, I'm fine. I'm so sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. I'm late. Something urgent came up." A deep, steady male voice interrupted me. I turned my head and looked directly at the man walking toward us. Unlike the refined, polished version of him in my memories after we married, his hair wasn't perfectly styled yet, and his face hadn't been hardened into sharp angles by the passing years. Why was he here? In my past life, he definitely hadn't shown up at this party. "It's good for a young man to be ambitious. Being a little busy is no problem at all," my father chuckled. He had always had a high opinion of Ethan. In my previous life, after we married, my father treated him like his own son. "Chloe was just mentioning you. Why don't you two go ahead and chat?" Ethan's hand, which was holding a champagne glass, froze. His gaze swept over toward me. "Sir, ma'am, since this is such a good opportunity, I have a bold request I'd like to make of you both. Today, I want to ask for your permission to marry your younger daughter, Sarah. I hope you will grant us your blessing." The atmosphere fell deathly silent. Everyone was stunned. Eyes darted back and forth between me, Sarah, and Ethan. In this circle, who didn't know that the Jiang and Miller families intended to unite through marriage? The intended match was the Jiang's eldest son, Ethan, and the Miller's eldest daughter, Chloe. Sarah, who was standing right next to me, widened her eyes. They were filled with passion, bashfulness, and disbelief. My parents were utterly bewildered. "Ethan, what is the meaning of this?" Ethan's gaze softened as it landed on Sarah. "I admire Sarah deeply. I hope to make her my wife." I stood rooted to the spot, letting the dry leaves fall onto me. It turned out he had been reborn too. It turned out the woman in his diary was her. No wonder he didn't show up in my previous life, yet rushed here today. "Chloe," my mother said, turning to grab my hand. "If you feel wronged, tell me. Your father and I are here. No one is going to bully you." It was no wonder my mother said that. Before this, Ethan and I had gotten along quite well. We had gone on several dates recently, and every time he dropped me off, he would come inside to greet my parents to make his presence felt. His words always hinted at the fact that we would be a couple in the future. In my last life, we officially confirmed our relationship after this party. I remained silent. Compared to the agony of seeing that diary and realizing my marriage was a farce for all those years, this didn't even qualify as a grievance. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I know this might upset you, but sometimes fate works in irrational ways." Ethan's voice was firm. "I don't want to hide it from you anymore. The one I love is Sarah. My previous interactions with Chloe were because I hadn't realized my own heart yet, which led to everyone's misunderstanding. I am truly sorry." He spoke as if it were as light as a feather. My father began to shake with rage. "What do you take the Miller house for? Who gave you the nerve to say these things? My daughter is the jewel of my eye, not some object for you to pick and choose. Please, leave." My mother comforted me, her face full of regret for misjudging his character. "Go. You are no longer welcome here." My father issued the order to expel the guest. Ethan hadn't expected them to be so ruthless. His face darkened. "Sir, ma'am, I truly want to marry Sarah." He looked at Sarah beside me with deep affection. "I swear I will treat her well for the rest of my life." Sarah's eyes turned red with emotion. "I do not agree," my father roared. He was a man of great pride, and I was the child he had cherished since birth. Ethan pulling a stunt like this was nothing short of a public insult to him. Ethan frowned. Perhaps he hadn't expected my father to reject him so bluntly. Dad. Sarah suddenly burst into loud sobs. Why? Why is it okay for my big sister but not for me? I'm your daughter too. Just because of my background, do I not even have the right to pursue happiness? My father looked at her with a mix of disappointment and anger. You shut your mouth. Sarah wouldn't listen. Why can't you consider my feelings just once, the way you do for Chloe? Ma'am, the only reason you're so angry is because I wasn't born to you. But Ethan loves me sincerely. Why must you insist on standing in our way? Her words were like pouring gasoline onto a fire. To my mother, Sarah was the result of a night when my father, while entertaining clients, was unfortunately framed by a competitor. By the time he realized what had happened, the woman had disappeared, only to send the child to him later. Over the years, even though my mother felt Sarah's presence was like a bone stuck in her throat, she tolerated her for my father's sake. Because Sarah grew up without a mother, my mother never let her lack for anything material. Even when she was sent abroad, she was provided with the best schools and caretakers. My mother felt she had fulfilled her duty of kindness and righteousness. Hearing Sarah speak like that now, my mother was so angry she spoke with cold finality. Who do you think you are to weigh yourself on a scale against my daughter? Sarah began to sob even more violently. Seeing this, Ethan stepped forward, pained, and comforted her. Are you all right? Protecting her behind his back, he looked at my parents with a stern expression and said, Sir, ma'am, one's background is not something an individual can choose. Sarah is kind and pure. She deserves to be treated better than anyone. Please do not reject us because of your prejudices. Seeing the situation grow increasingly tense and noticing the odd looks from the guests, I spoke up to soothe the room. Mom, Dad, there's no need to be angry over this. There was never anything official between Ethan and me anyway. Now that everything is out in the open, isn't it better if everyone finds someone more suitable for themselves? Hearing this, my parents' expressions softened considerably. Out of respect for the other guests, they didn't say anything more. All right, why don't you both go back to the guests? I'll handle things here, I said, ushering them inside. I gave my mother a reassuring nod when I saw her still looking back at me with concern. Ethan looked at me as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Why, do I need to call security to escort you both out? I asked. You're being far too dramatic, Ethan snapped at me, his voice full of reproach. Sarah is your sister, and this is her home too. What right do you have to kick her out? I stood there stunned. In our previous life, he had never spoken to me so harshly. Catching a glimpse of the smug smile on the woman's lips in his arms, I suddenly snapped out of it. If I acknowledge her as my sister, then she is. If I say she isn't, then she is absolutely nothing. Ethan was momentarily speechless. Sarah leaned into his chest, looking aggrieved. Ethan, stop. Don't blame my big sister. She has always looked down on me. Ethan stroked her hair compassionately and then looked at me with disappointment. Chloe, I never expected you to be this kind of person. How did you become so stubborn and unreasonable? I shook my head, finding it nothing but laughable. A lifetime of marriage meant less than a few manipulative words from an outsider. Please leave. Ethan, assuming he had struck a nerve and that I was acting out of embarrassment, gave a cold snort. Sarah, let's go. I watched their retreating figures, a faint ache appearing in my chest. Memories of those peaceful years of marriage flickered by like a movie, stopping at the image of that diary filled with his love and regret for her. The ache in my heart slowly stabilized. In this life, I hoped he wouldn't regret his choice. As for me, having escaped a hollow marriage with Ethan, I would live a new, more brilliant life. He and I would go our separate ways, never to meet again. News that the eldest son of the Jiang family and the second daughter of the Miller family were in love quickly spread through high society. Some sources revealed that Ethan had fallen in love with Sarah at first sight and hadn't hesitated to propose publicly, showing deep devotion. Paparazzi even captured clear photos of Ethan driving Sarah to various luxury brand stores. By the window of a high-end restaurant, the two sat across from each other as he leaned over to wipe her mouth. By the seashore, he held her from behind as she leaned her head back bashfully. On a crowded street, he held her face and kissed her deeply with passion. In the photos, Ethan showed a pampered and relaxed side of himself that I had never seen. It turned out he could look at someone with such tenderness. It turned out that when he cared, he could be that meticulous. It turned out this was what he truly looked like when he found his real love. My eyes felt a bit stingy. Chloe, there's an auction in a few days. Would you like to go? My mother entered my room with an invitation, observing me carefully. She had clearly seen the news as well. There are some early works by an artist you like. I thought about it for a moment and agreed. The auction was held at a private art museum in the suburbs. There weren't many guests. I found an inconspicuous spot to sit down. Halfway through the auction, the item was finally brought onto the stage. The starting price wasn't high, and I raised my paddle twice. Just as I was about to secure it, a familiar voice rang out from the row behind me. 500,000. I looked up. Not far behind me, Sarah was snuggling next to Ethan. Ethan, I love this painting so much. Whatever you want, you shall have, you silly girl, Ethan said, kissing her cheek. Benny turned to look at me with a smug smile. I frowned and continued to raise my paddle. 600,000. 700,000. 800,000. 900,000. 1 million. 1.5 million. The price had far exceeded the actual value of the painting. Small whispers of gossip filled the auction room. He clearly knew I loved this artist's work. I gripped the paddle in my hand, suddenly feeling that this whole thing was quite tedious. Wasting time over such a trivial matter simply wasn't worth it. I set my paddle down, signaling my withdrawal from the bidding. After the auction ended, I had just reached the museum exit when a voice called out to stop me. Big sister, wait a second. What is it? Big sister, are you angry? I didn't mean to snatch that painting from you, Sarah said, hurrying over to stand in front of me. Ethan knew I liked it, so he insisted on buying it for me. I couldn't even stop him. If you really want it, I can give it to you. No, that's not necessary, I replied indifferently, having no desire to waste words on her. If there's nothing else, I'll be going now. Sarah pouted, and just as she was about to continue her boasting, her expression suddenly shifted. Big sister, I know you've always disliked me. You feel like I stole your position, and now I've stolen Ethan. But I truly never intended to take anything of yours. Ethan and I are sincerely in love. You have such great qualities. You'll definitely find someone better than him later. Please, just don't hate me anymore. Okay? Sarah, there's no need to let yourself feel so wronged, Ethan said, stepping forward to shield the tearful Sarah. He looked at me with deep dissatisfaction. Sarah is only concerned about you, worried that you're upset. Why do you have to act like this? I was the one bidding on the painting. If you're unhappy, take it out on me. His protective stance made it seem as though I had committed some unspeakable crime. I looked up, staring directly into the eyes that had once led me to believe they were overflowing with affection for me. You're overthinking it. I've never cared about things this unimportant. Do you have to talk like that? Ethan snapped. Even if I chose Sarah over you, it doesn't change the fact that she is your sister. You don't need to take your anger out on her. I nearly laughed out of sheer frustration. I hadn't realized that several years of marriage weren't enough for me to fully understand the depths of the conceited man standing before me. Did he really think he was some rare treasure? By what right did he assume I couldn't survive without him? Ethan was momentarily choked up, his face flushing through various shades of irritation. Big sister, don't be mad. Ethan didn't mean it like that. He just wants us to get along. Sarah's voice pulled Ethan back. Chloe, I can understand that there is resentment in your heart, Ethan said. But don't let so-called pride and jealousy destroy who you once were. Even if we can't be lovers, we don't necessarily have to be enemies. He still believed I was suffering because I couldn't have him. The pain of being deceived in my past life combined with my current fury, swirling together until it felt like my chest would explode. I don't need your understanding. Whether the two of you are a fated match or just mutually infatuated has nothing to do with me. Just stay away from me. I find it annoying. Big sister, if you don't want to see me, I'll just avoid you when I go home from now on, Sarah sobbed, leaning into Ethan's chest and crying like a monsoon. Ethan held her tightly, his heart clearly aching for her. His gaze turned ice cold as it swept over to me. Chloe, I didn't realize you could be so bitter. Sarah is your sister after all. How can you push her to this point? Your words are far too hurtful. Apologize to Sarah now. I didn't realize you were someone who couldn't tell right from wrong, Ethan Jiang, I retorted. I turned my back to leave, unwilling to linger for even another second. Stay right there. Master Jiang is certainly putting on quite a show of authority, isn't he? A sudden male voice made me stop in my tracks. Yelling at a lady in public? Was the Jiang family's etiquette taught by a bunch of street thugs? Luke Reed, dressed in a dark suit, strolled toward us. Seeing who it was, Ethan immediately wiped the anger from his face. Master Reed, it's been a long time. Luke ignored him and walked straight to my side. I was listening from a distance and thought I was watching some tragic melodrama. Turns out it's just Master Jiang presiding over justice. Master Reed, this is our private business. Is that so? Luke raised an eyebrow, the sound of his lighter clicking shut echoing in the hall. But the eldest Miss Miller is my savior. I can't exactly stand by and watch her be treated so rudely on my own turf. His words sounded casual, but the protective intent behind them was unmistakable. Ethan's face turned unsightly. The Reed family stood at the very pinnacle of high society. In every possible respect, the Jiangs were no match for them. So, Master Reed and Chloe are old acquaintances? Do I need to explain myself to you? Luke didn't give him an inch of face. Sarah looked at Ethan's shifting expression and tugged on his sleeve. Ethan, didn't you say you had work? Let's just go. The hallway finally returned to silence. I looked at the man I was meeting for the first time since my rebirth. Big sister? The man who had just looked so indifferent suddenly froze, a hint of awkwardness flashing in his eyes. You are older than me, after all. As he spoke, a red flush quickly spread across his ears. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. Luke was the youngest son of the Reed family, the top family in the capital. With an older brother and sister above him, he had been pampered his whole life to the point of being utterly lawless. Though his temperament was arrogant and unruly, he wasn't like other spoiled rich kids who only knew how to squander money. The whole savior thing was a lie, though. I had never saved him. We were just acquainted. It was all because of my close relationship with his cousin. In my past life, when Ethan's company was hit by a crisis, an anonymous investor poured in a massive amount of capital to keep him afloat. I only found out later, by pure chance, that it had been done for my sake. I had been passing by a private room at a club and overheard Luke talking to some friends. Someone asked him why he'd bothered to step in and save Ethan Jiang. He simply replied, "No reason. If Ethan crashes, she'll definitely be sad." "You've really got it bad," his friend had remarked. "I've never seen anyone so blindly in love. Chloe Miller must have said a lot of prayers in her past life to deserve meeting someone like you." At that time, I had already been married to Ethan for several years. I could only pretend I hadn't heard, though I silently vowed to repay him if the opportunity ever arose. I never imagined our paths would cross again so soon. "Thank you," I said sincerely. I was thanking him for everything, for standing up for me just now, and for everything he did in my previous life. "And how exactly do you plan on thanking me, big sister?" His skin was quite pale, and since we were standing close, I could see his Adam's apple bob nervously as he swallowed. I let out a soft laugh. "How do you want me to thank you, as long as it's within my power?" His deep, melodic voice rose slightly, carrying an undetectable hint of joy. I looked into his eyes and saw only my own reflection. I gave a small nod. A few days after the auction, a close friend of mine hosted a dinner party at a private club. Everyone attending was part of our social circle. 3 rounds of drinks in, the door opened and a few of the girls' eyes lit up instantly. "Why is Luke Reed here? Didn't that little prince say he was away on a business trip?" "I was discussing some things with the elders. I heard you all were here, so I thought I'd stop by," Luke replied nonchalantly. His gaze lingered on me for a split second before slowly moving away. "I knew he'd show up," my best friend whispered, nudging me with her elbow. "Huh." I didn't quite catch her meaning. "This guy originally said he wasn't coming. The second I mentioned you were here, he was out the door and on his way." I looked at the man who had just walked in, my eyes a bit hazy from the alcohol. He must have come straight from a formal social engagement. He was wearing a navy blue suit with a light striped shirt that made his legs look incredibly long. His refined face was the kind that made it easy for people to lose themselves when he smiled. He truly lived up to his reputation as the man most women in this city wanted to sleep with. Even now, I find it hard to believe that someone like him could love me so deeply. "Don't talk nonsense. It's probably just a coincidence," I said. My friend rolled her eyes and called out to him. "Master Reed, could you help me get Chloe home later? I don't feel comfortable letting her take a taxi. She's staying over at the Skyview Manor area right now, which is the same direction you're going." "Wait, what?" I stared at my friend wide-eyed. Luke's gaze cut through the crowd to meet mine. After a few seconds, I saw him nod. Great. Thanks, Master Reed. My friend giggled, then leaned in to whisper in my ear. I've set the stage for you. Make sure you take the lead. Based on my experience, a top-tier specimen like Master Reed could probably go 18 rounds in one night. Don't forget to share your user experience with me later. How do you even know he wants to sleep with me? When have I ever been wrong about men? The way he looks at you, it's like he wants to strip you bare, right then and there. Trust me on this. If the men I've slept with don't make up a full football team, they at least make a basketball squad. I don't miss these things. When the party ended, Luke drove me back to Skyview Manor. At the security gate, as I prepared to get out, I thanked him. Thank you, Luke. He leaned his arm against the car window, tilting his head to look at me. It was on my way. Looking at his exceptionally handsome face, I suddenly remembered my friend's words. Do you want to come up for a bit? A look of surprise flashed across Luke's face. Are you sure? At this hour? As if possessed, I blurted out, What, are you scared? We started kissing the moment the door clicked shut. I can't remember who initiated it. I only remember that by the time Luke ended the kiss, my legs had turned to jelly. Chloe Miller, are you sober right now? He caressed my lips. Why? If I'm not sober, are you planning to stop? The alcohol made me bold. I leaned in close and blew softly into his ear, feeling a wave of satisfaction as I watched his ears turn bright red. Luke suddenly chuckled. He lowered his head, pressing his lips mere inches from mine, his tone becoming dead serious. Just remember, you're the one who started this. All through the night, I was tossed and turned again and again. The world before my eyes flickered between light and dark. I slept straight through until noon, finally waking up to the sound of my phone ringing. I forced my eyes open and pressed answer. So? How was it? Was it soul-shattering? Are you still in a trance? My friend asked excitedly on the other end. I'm so tired. If you have something to say it fast. The moment I opened my mouth, I froze. My voice was so raspy I barely recognized it as my own. Oh my God. That voice. Master Reed is truly extraordinary, my friend shrieked. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I was startled when a hand suddenly reached over and took the phone from me. Let's talk another day. She needs her rest, Luke said before hanging up. Immediately after, a messy head of hair buried itself into my neck. Soft strands of hair brushed against my cheek. Did you sleep well last night, big sister? It tickles. I tried to shrink away. Don't get so close. What, you're turning cold on me after you're finished with me? A warm, masculine breath was right against my skin, his lips nearly glued to my flesh. I'm just not used to this yet. Talk to me properly, I said, hurriedly trying to stop his hand from its intentional climb from my waist upward. Luke refused to listen. He turned me around, cupping my face in both hands, and leaned in for another deep kiss. Wait. Be good, Chloe, he whispered, his voice dropping an octave. I had nowhere to hide. Very quickly, the hands I had braced against his chest lost their strength, and I gradually drifted away into the sensation. Didn't you say I needed to rest? I managed to murmur. You go ahead and sleep. You do your thing, and I'll do mine. Luke was incredibly clingy. From that night on, flowers he ordered arrived at my office every single day. After work, his silhouette would appear punctually at the door. One evening, while we were out having dinner, I suddenly spoke up. Luke, do you want to marry me? Luke clearly hadn't expected that question. He tilted his head and let out a few soft coughs. I watched as the faint red flush that had just faded from his ears began to creep back. A few seconds later, he turned back to look at me, gave a firm, certain nod, and said with total gravity, Yes. I want to be with you for the rest of my life, Chloe Miller. His answer wasn't entirely outside my expectations, but hearing him admit it with his own lips still made my heart flutter. He looked at me with a gaze so straightforward that I almost didn't dare to meet his eyes. I know you don't love me yet, he said. Maybe you don't even like me that much, but we can take it slow. I have faith in myself. I felt a secret sigh of relief. He was right. I had a good impression of him and a sense of gratitude. But as for love, that feeling had been worn down to nothing and crushed into dust by Ethan Jiang. I didn't dare touch it again so easily. I'm in no rush. I don't want you to marry me out of gratitude, or because you feel I'm a suitable match. I want you to be completely willing. I want you to acknowledge me simply for who I am. I want you to want to walk the rest of your life with me. I have to admit, hearing that moved me. In my past life, Ethan and I had simply followed the natural course set by our elders. The most moving confession I had ever heard back then was a casual, "I love you, honey, marry me," which he tossed out while proposing. In our daily lives, he funneled most of his passion into his work and rarely shared these kinds of heartfelt thoughts with me. I used to think he was just shy about expressing himself, but after reading his diary, I understood. There is no man who is bad at expressing love. He simply doesn't care about you enough. If he loves you, he could rip his heart out for you and still feel it wasn't enough. I smiled. "Luke, what training course did you learn those lines from?" He swirled his wine glass, looking at me deeply. His light-colored eyes under the lamps were like a deep sea reflecting the stars. A man will naturally become an expert when he's in front of the woman he loves deeply. My heart skipped a beat. To hide my warming face, I teased him intentionally. "And here I thought you were trained by some ex-girlfriend." He suddenly looked displeased. "Whether I've ever had a girlfriend or not? Don't you know by now?" How was I supposed to know that? He turned his face away without answering, simply moving a piece of pre-cut steak onto my plate. "Eat more." It wasn't until he drove me home, followed me inside, and entered the bedroom that I understood the meaning behind his words. "Do you know now?" His heavy sweat dripped down. Looking at the swaying ceiling before my eyes, I could barely breathe. Slow down a bit." "Is it not comfortable, big sister?" He whispered into my ear, then licked my palm as if to please me. I couldn't help but shoot him a glare, but because I was completely drained of strength, it looked like a look of endearment in Luke's eyes. He excitedly tightened his grip on my waist. "Talk to me, Chloe. Why aren't you saying anything?" I tilted my head away, unwilling to acknowledge his question. He wasn't angry. He just buried his head in my neck, kissing me back and forth. Eventually, I was tormented beyond endurance. I mindlessly raked my fingernails across his back, leaving long red welts. "What is it, Chloe?" Luke's eyes were red. The muscles in his arms tensed hard. "If you don't tell me, how will I know what you want?" He tormented me to the point that I couldn't hold back my tears. "Hick. Luke Reed, you're too much. You just have to force me." Okay, I won't say it anymore. I'll give it to you. I'll give it all to you." I drifted in and out of sleep. I only remember Luke saying one final thing in my ear. "Chloe, let's stay together like this forever, okay? No one in this world will ever love you more than I do." Over the weekend, I went home to have dinner with my parents. My mother told me that a few days ago, Sarah had brought Ethan home, saying they wanted to get married and settle down. Out of respect for the relationship between the two families, my father agreed to be present, but the union wasn't exactly off to a smooth start. Ethan's mother did not approve of the marriage. I could roughly guess why. The old lady placed a huge emphasis on social standing and family background. Ethan's grandfather was the type to have affairs among the flowers, having illegitimate children that caused the legitimate wife to leave in a rage. As her son, Ethan's mother hated that kind of person most. Therefore, Sarah was an eyesore to her. I heard that by the end of that meal, Sarah had run out the door in tears. Ethan, of course, had to chase after her to comfort her, but his mother had issued an ultimatum. Between the two of them, he could only choose one. Ethan was caught in the middle, in a very difficult position. Sarah was manipulative. She didn't talk about her own grievances, but simply cried, saying that no matter what, she would stay by his side. It didn't matter to Ethan if Sarah didn't have an official status, and as a result, he pitied her even more. He took her with him everywhere he went. Just when everyone thought the two of them were a done deal, someone witnessed them having a fierce argument. It turned out that Sarah was naturally suspicious. She had spotted Ethan having a private dinner and chatting happily with a beautiful woman. Remembering that Ethan had been coming home later and later recently, smelling strongly of alcohol, the blood rushed to her head, and she stormed over to confront him. Ethan had already been socializing for days and was on the verge of signing a major deal, only to have it ruined like this. Even though she was the woman he loved, he couldn't help but fly into a rage at her. Sarah was stunned for a moment by his bloodshot eyes and harsh words, which only convinced her further that Ethan had experienced a change of heart. The fire of jealousy in her heart burned even more fiercely, and she began to spew venomous, spiteful words without a second thought. Ethan hadn't expected Sarah to have this side to her. It completely overturned the pure image of her he had cherished across 2 lifetimes. I didn't hear much more after that because Luke came to pick me up. I don't know how he sensed it, but he seemed to think I still had some lingering feelings for Ethan and had been pushing hard for an official status lately. Every time I went home, he insisted on coming along to win over my parents, who, to my chagrin, absolutely adored him. But to me, love isn't something that can be forced. I believe in letting things happen naturally. I was very satisfied with my current state with Luke. When I told him this, he gave me a long, resentful look, but said nothing, only making me pay the debt back twofold that night. Parallel to my blossoming romance, my career was also on the rise. Through my own hard work, I opened a small to medium-sized design firm, building a career that belonged solely to me. In my past life, because Ethan said he didn't want me to struggle and worried I'd be exhausted, I had given up my passions after marriage. Now, I had finally made up for that regret. From that point on, our paths diverged completely. I thought Ethan and I would never have any contact again until we happened to run into each other at a wedding. We both attended alone, and coincidentally, he was seated at the table right next to mine. I truly couldn't stand the constant eyes drifting toward me, so halfway the banquet, I stepped into the back garden to get some fresh air. I hadn't been standing there long before I heard footsteps behind me. "Chloe, is there something you need? Can we talk for a moment?" He stepped 2 paces closer, lowering his voice. "It's not convenient to talk here. Let's find somewhere quieter." "No need," I said, taking a step back to maintain my distance. "Whatever you have to say it here." Ethan frowned, looking quite dissatisfied. "It's been so long. Are you still angry? You weren't this petty before." I looked at him silently, the pain in my heart no longer as sharp as it once was. Seeing that I remained completely unmoved, he took a deep breath. "Do you really have to pretend we're strangers? If this is all you intended to say, then please excuse me." "Wait," Ethan said, sounding a bit embarrassed as he started. "It's like this. You've probably heard about the current situation with Jiang Corp. I need Luke Reed's help. If he just gives the nod, I can stabilize the situation and turn things around. For the sake of our old feelings, could you say a few words to him for me? If you ask, he'll definitely agree." So it was for this. I suddenly remembered that in my past life, his company had run into trouble at exactly this time. Why hadn't his brain been reborn along with him? Old feelings. I almost laughed out loud. In truth, if he hadn't sought me out, we would never have spoken again. In my past life, though he deceived me, he ultimately hadn't caused me any catastrophic harm. I only wished for us to live separate lives now. But by what right did he assume that, after he stood by Sarah, ignored my feelings, and let others point fingers at me, I should still be warm toward him? I truly felt it wasn't worth it for my past self. The man I had loved for so many years turned out to be just a hollow shell. I smiled and said, "He already helped you. You already received his help in your previous life." The early autumn wind carried a slight chill, and the occasional clink of champagne glasses echoed nearby. Ethan looked at me in shock, his mouth opening and closing as if he had just heard something impossible. After a long while, he managed to speak. You came back too?" I nodded. Ethan's face instantly turned as white as a sheet of paper. "Since when? The day of your father's birthday?" "Yes. So that's how it is," he muttered under his breath, then looked at me with a complicated gaze. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you confront me?" I gave a soft, self-deprecating smile. "You came back, and the first thing you did was come to my house to demand to marry Sarah. I'm not stupid. I'm a human being, and I have my own pride." Ethan lowered his head and apologized. I let out a sigh of relief, suppressing the emotions rising in my chest. "It's all in the past. I don't want to bring it up again." "It's not like that." Ethan suddenly looked up. "It's not like that," he argued loudly, his eyes suddenly lighting up with a desperate intensity. "You're only staying with Luke Reed because you're resentful that I chose Sarah, aren't you?" I shook my head. "Ethan, don't assume everyone is as superficial as you are. I'm with Luke because I like him. It's as simple as that." "I don't believe you." His emotions were beginning to spiral out of control. "In our past life, we were so devoted to each other. How could you just... If you could do it, why couldn't I?" I interrupted him, my voice cold. He acted as if he hadn't heard me. "Is it because of Sarah? Are you still just saying these things out of spite?" "No. I can break up with her. I regret it all, Chloe." He called my name with the same remorseful tone he used in our previous life. "Chloe, listen, I really just wanted to make up for a regret from the past. But after being with Sarah, I realized she's changed. We fight constantly. Every time I try to end it, she threatens to kill herself. I can't take it anymore. I'm distancing myself from her now. I've been good enough to her already. I can't let her destroy me too. Besides, Chloe, if we've both been given a second chance at life, can't we just go back to the way things were? I stared at the Ethan Jan who was slowly losing his grip on reality, feeling absolutely nothing. Stop lying to yourself. To you, profit always comes first, doesn't it? In our past life, you chose me simply because my status was a good match. In this life, you chose Sarah to satisfy a lingering obsession with what you couldn't have. Now that you've tried it and found it unsatisfying, you want to turn back. But why do you think the world would just sit around and wait for you? Ethan shook his head blankly. That's not it, Chloe. My feelings for you were sincere too. Do you really think I'd still believe that? I said flatly. It was over between us the moment I saw that diary. After that wedding banquet, Ethan sent me several messages. The content was always the same: repentance and nostalgia for the past. Reading them only made me feel a mix of ridicule and sorrow. The sweet details he described now felt forced and hollow. I didn't reply. I simply moved him to my blacklist. In this life, since I wasn't with him, Luke naturally didn't step in to help. After the internal power struggle at Giancorp turned ugly, the family patriarch grew completely disillusioned with Ethan and shifted his support to another nephew. Ethan was sidelined and, as a result, shunned by high society. During that time, he tried to find me again. I had been feeling a bit overwhelmed by how clingy Luke was, so I had moved back home for a while. I don't know where Ethan got his information, but he showed up at my door every day carrying a bouquet of roses. He actually thought those were what I liked. My father ordered the staff to block him at the gate and told him not to come back. Ethan remained disturbingly calm, even asking the security guard to pass along a message. I was wrong to fail Chloe before. From now on, I will treat her well. We are a match made in heaven. My father was so angry he wanted to give him a physical thrashing. Later, Luke found out about it. I don't know how he handled it, but by the time I heard the news, Ethan had been transferred to some remote, backwater county. By then, Luke and I were already engaged. One afternoon, as I snuggled in Luke's arms, I suddenly remembered something. I looked up and asked him, "Hey, when did you first start liking me?" Luke's fingers stiffened. A red flush spread across his ears at a speed visible to the naked eye. He pretended to be calm, picking up a cup of coffee nearby to take a sip. "That was ages ago," he muttered. "Who could remember?" "Really?" I leaned in close, smiling, as I watched his ears turn even redder. "Was it love at first sight?" Luke, pushed into a corner by my gaze, pulled me into a tight embrace. "Big sister, have some mercy on me." I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat accelerate. I couldn't help but smile. Outside the window, the courtyard was bathed in brilliant sunlight. Happiness was finally looking toward the future.